Hello. So, we are starting now with our lesson 4. And lesson 4 is the Roman Empire, and we are going to, this is a very important lesson because the lesson talks about the Roman Empire from the beginning, from Octavian, who became known as Augustus, and then during the time of the Roman Empire, in fact, during the time of Augustus, a new world religion started. And as we mentioned before, religion is a very important part of history because religion in general shapes the way society behaves, especially when a religion like Christianity involves a code of behavior. Judaism includes a code of behavior. The religion of the Greeks and the Romans did not, but Christianity does. So the values that became part of Western civilization are the values that were stated in the new religion of the Roman Empire. So we are going to then spend a great deal of time looking at the history of Christianity. Now remember, this is not a religion class, so we are going to look at history of religions. We talked about the religion of Zoroaster. We are going to talk about the religious world during the Roman Empire, as long as we keep that in the realm of history. I hope everything is okay with it. So we are going to be seeing and looking at religion from the outside. We are also going to be talking about other religious groups like Judaism in the Roman Empire, and we are also going to talk about what is called the mystery religions that also appeared in the Roman Empire. So, but we'll spend a great deal of time talking about the origin of religion, of Christianity, and how it grew, how it was organized, and eventually in the next lesson we are going to look at how Christianity, which started as a very small group of Jews, became the official religion of the Roman Empire. But that's for next lesson. So for now, let's start, and I just want you to look at this map. And if you remember the map or maps that we looked at during the Roman Republic, you'll see that all the region around the Mediterranean world has become the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire then is the region that developed around the Mediterranean. So it all started when Egypt, you remember in the Battle of Actium, Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra and took Egypt as his own personal land. And then, in a very generous way, he donated the land to Rome, and Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. So we are going to then look at, in this lesson, what is called the new order established by Octavian. Octavian was a very smart person. He was a genius, and he knew that he wanted power. He knew he wanted full power, but he was going to manipulate the system in a way that even though he would have the power, it would appear as he was re-establishing the principles of the Republic. So the first thing that you are going to see in this lesson is how Octavian manipulated both the Senate and all the institutions of the Republic, and pretending to establish the Republic, he ended up having total power, and that's how we historians have seen that even though he's saying that he's re-establishing the Republic that was in such chaos after the death of Julius Caesar, now he says we have a new republic, but in reality we have a system that we call the Principate, or that he called the Principate, but in which he had practically all the power. And the Senate was just, in a way, a puppet of Octavian. So this is the first thing that we are going to look at in this lesson. And then the lesson is going to concentrate on the cultural aspects of the Roman Empire, including some social issues such as slavery, such as the gladiator games, what is called the gladiatorial games, and we are going to look at how society worked. So for now, I would like to just mention before we go into the next topic that as manipulative and as negative some of Octavian's decisions were, one thing that we need to be thankful for is that he established 200 years, approximately 200 years, of what is called the Roman peace. And of course in Latin that means Pax Romana. That doesn't mean that there was real peace. In fact, assassinations of the emperors continued, a lot of violence went on, especially the few times that during this period they tried to conquer new lands. But in general, during the empire, the land of the Romans did not expand that much. But anyway, for those 200 years that we call the Pax Romana, most of the Roman achievements that we admire, buildings, roads, development of the legal system, philosophy, so all those things that we think, wow, these are legacies from the Romans, all of those happened during those 200 years. And then at the end of the Pax Romana, the decline of Rome began. The decline never stopped for a little while under two emperors, Diocletian and Constantine, and we'll talk about them in the next lesson. And then eventually Rome could not survive and was run over by other groups, by the Germanic people, but we'll talk about those again later. So apart from the Pax Romana, the analysis of the Pax Romana, I would like to concentrate today in this introduction analyzing a little bit, or maybe telling you a little bit about the Roman art and the Roman architecture, because these are achievements of the Romans that were a very important legacy of Rome to Western civilization. Not because the Romans were great creative individuals, but because the Romans were smart enough to take the Greek art, the Greek concepts of art, adopted them, and then built upon them. What you see here are actually Roman statues, but if you remember, they are very much in the style of Greek sculpture. So the Romans, in many ways, we could say that they copied the Greek principles of art. However, the Romans were great innovators, and the innovation is mainly in architecture. And even though they did follow the three Greek orders of architecture, remember, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian, they used them, but they used them within their innovation. And their big innovation, maybe, and I tell you, it's not really an innovation because the Etruscans before them had used them, but they perfected them. And the big innovation is the arch, the Roman arch. It's a half a circle built like this, and the secret is what is called the keystone. So the keystone supports the art. And they use the art in three ways. Just a plain arch, like this, and then they moved the arch long ways to create what we would say is a tunnel, but it's called the vault, the burial vault. And then when you move the arch all around, you create what is called a dome or a cupola. So the use of the arch is the great innovation. From the perspective of art, of artistic architecture, that's what the Romans added. But for instance, if you look at this building could be looked at as a Greek building, but it is a little Roman building, which is in the center of Rome. Now, if you can look at the capital of this building, the capital that the Romans loved and they used is the Corinthian capital. So out of the three orders of architecture, the Romans liked the Corinthian one. But they adapted. They didn't have the perfect proportions that the Romans had, that the Greeks had used. They adapted them, and sometimes they even dared to do what the Greeks would not have liked. They mixed 2 or 3 orders of architecture. For instance, one day we were walking in Rome, in the city, in the center of the city, and we saw a column on the floor. And when we analyzed the column, we noticed that the capital had first, it had the Ionic capital, and on top of the Ionic capital, it had the Corinthian one. This is something that the Greeks would never have done. But the Romans took some liberties. And if you look at this, is maybe the most famous and best known building in Rome. This is the Colosseum. And if you notice, if you analyze it very closely, this has 3 levels, and in the first level it has Doric columns, in the second it has Ionic, and in the third one it has Corinthian. So even though it is a round structure, which the Romans not invented but innovated, it still uses the Greek styles of architecture. So this is one of the aspects of the Romans that is important that you remember. And the use of the arch was used for practical purposes. And one of the purposes, something that you see everywhere in the old Roman Empire, is the way the Romans took water from remote areas to the cities. And this is what we call the aqueducts. And the aqueducts were based on also the arches. Now, how did they manage? This is the upper part of an aqueduct. And I like to show it to you because for a long time, when I started studying art history and I looked at the aqueducts, I don't know why. I was kind of naive and stupid, and I always thought that the water went through the arches. And it took me, I don't know how long, but it took me a while to realize that the arches were just the structure, was just the basis of the aqueduct, and that the aqueduct, or the water actually, went on top. So the water went this. And you may think, oh, this is so obvious or ridiculous, but I wanted to show it to you because for a long time, I just didn't even think about that. And of course, another very important thing that the Romans did was they used concrete. Now, if you are familiar with our construction devices today, you know that concrete is used as foundation because concrete is very, very strong. And the Greeks didn't have concrete, didn't use it. So the Greeks could not build these huge structures that the Romans did. So the grandiose structures that we see in Rome, we only find because of this another important innovation by the Romans, which was the concrete. So we are going then to talk about another, out of all the big buildings and big constructions by the Romans, this is my favorite one, and this may be the most important one, and the one that shows the Roman spirit. And even though this introduction to the lesson is supposed to be short, I just want to be sure that you remember when you study. It is called the Pantheon. Now look at the name. Pantheon is not the Parthenon. The Parthenon is in Athens. The Pantheon is in Rome. And what is really amazing of the Pantheon is that is the perfect example of what Roman architecture is. So they take advantage of their Greek heritage. So you see here in the front, in the entrance of the Pantheon, you have the perfect example of a Greek temple with the Corinthian capitals that they use. But then the back is the perfect example of the Roman innovations. If you see here, here is the inside, and it has the round structure and it has the dome. And it is beautiful. It's a beautiful building. If you go to Rome today, it is today a museum, so you can go in and you can admire it. But the wonderful thing about it is one of the few perfectly preserved ancient buildings by the Romans. And why is it perfectly preserved? Well, I tell you in a second. But before I tell you why it's preserved, let me tell you why this building is also important. Apart from its architecture, it is important because it shows the attitude of the Romans toward religion. The way the Romans were. They were the most tolerant people in the world at the time as far as culture and religion. Since they had expanded to so many lands and each society had different views, different values, and different gods and goddesses, then as the Romans are expanding, the Romans are adopting, or at least accepting, all the gods and goddesses that each of the societies that they conquer worship. So the Pantheon in the city of Rome is the temple dedicated to all and every god or goddess within the Roman Empire. Hundreds of deities, as we say, are worshipped in the Pantheon. Or I should not say in the Pantheon, I should say outside of the Pantheon, because the Romans, just like the Greeks, worshipped outside of the temples. And so the Pantheon then is like a symbol of the attitude of the Romans toward the conquered people and toward the ideas and values of the conquered people. Now, what I was going to tell you before is why is it that the Pantheon is so well preserved? Because when Christianity became the official religion of the empire, the Christians, the Christian leaders, took this building and made it into a Christian temple. So this Christian temple was of course preserved because it was in use. Christians would go into the Pantheon to worship, and so the Pantheon as a building was preserved for a long time. And when recently, I guess it was about maybe in the 19th century, when the building was taken over by the state of Italy, then they continued with the preservation. So that's why it's really a beautiful place to admire and to look at. And today there are some tombs of famous people. I believe Galileo is buried there, and I believe also Raphael, one of the Renaissance artists, his tomb is still there. So you can go in, admire it, admire the Roman art and Roman architecture that existed during the time of the Roman Empire. So what we are going to do now, we are going to look at the religious world of the Roman Empire. And of course we are not going to spend as much time as you are going to spend later talking about it and reading about it. But what I would like to mention just briefly, that of course the Romans inherited the gods and goddesses of the Greeks. So that's the state religion of the Romans was the Greek and Roman. At the same time, you are going to study how, partly because of Augustus, and partly because the other emperors liked it, there was something that became known as the imperial cult. And it is every emperor became deified, so that means every emperor was considered a god and therefore worshipped as a god. This is one of the issues that neither the Jews nor the Christians accepted, and this is what caused some of the problems, especially with the Christians. And then we also have some other type of religion, and they are called the mystery cults. And when you read about them, you'll see why they became very important, not only during the Hellenistic period, but then during the Roman Republic, and then during the Roman Empire. And you are going to look at one of them, which is called Mithraism, which is in many ways similar to Christianity. And this is also one of those issues that historians look at and say, why are there so many similarities between Mithraism and in general between the mystery religions and Christianity? So these are the general religious cults or religious aspects of Rome. But then the key word is tolerance, because the Romans were tolerant of all religions, as long as Roman citizens worshipped the state gods and goddesses, and they participated in the imperial cult. As long as you did that, you were perfectly accepted. But if you refused to do that, then you were considered not a good citizen, and then you would have to be considered a criminal. And this is one of the reasons why Christians became persecuted, because they were not willing to be part of the imperial cult or of the Greco-Roman worshiping. In the last part of the lesson, we are going to talk about the origin of Christianity, etc. And before that, I would like for you to focus a little on the Jewish world during the first century, during the time, during the time that Christianity was born, because it's important to understand what was going on among the Jews, to understand the role of Christianity. And something that is going to be very important for you to maybe analyze and look at is the Dead Sea Scrolls, that precisely were produced or preserved by a group of Jews that is called the Essenes, and they saved all their documents in scrolls and hid them, and they were found in 1947, I believe. So, and they, as the scrolls have been deciphered, it's been so fascinating to find out what was going on in the Jewish world during the time that Jesus was born, because the Essenians or Essenes lived around the time that Jesus was born. And there is a very important video that I want you to watch to see the controversy surrounding the Dead Sea Scrolls. Ends our study of lesson 4, and with this I would like to say goodbye. I am just giving you the general information about what the lesson is about, and I would like to remind you that I'm here, and I'm here to help, and I'm here to help you succeed. So call me or email me or post any question on the discussions board, and then whatever you have problems with, I am here to help.